This is where it goes. Recording in progress.
It is recording. Okay, yeah, but I think it's also worth saying that NHL is like invariably softer than NBA and NFL and even MLB. I think that it's softer in MLB too because people
Oh,
just like
100%. Couldn't agree more.
people care way too much about like trying to pick the right players and trying to like figure out the best cheap X, Y, or Z when it's really just like just fucking figure out who you want to correlate, do that, and then play whatever goalie really fits. Like there's a little bit more to it than that, but that's pretty much all that it is. It's easier to do that. I think that people kind of understand that a little bit about MLB, but I think there's this weird kind of like counterbalance thing where people understand that MLB has a lot of variance, so they don't try to drill things down as far as they used to. But it's kind of the opposite with NHL. People think that NHL has like this big unexperienced edge, so they have to drill down farther, and so people try too hard, and then they end up overfitting. When NHL is just like an easier version of MLB. That's how I feel
Yeah.
about it.
No, I don't disagree. I think people get overwhelmed. I remember the first time I played NHL a few years ago. I was just overwhelmed by not understanding the way lines are correlated with each other and not understanding D-men, like what if they're on power play or not. I think it just is overwhelming. And then when people start to figure it out, to your point, they kind of go overboard on on things that are like too in the weeds. Um, and Yeah, it's kind of like a pure. I mean, the nice thing about hockey is it has so much variance and volatility that it kind of allows you to lean into. I mean, I don't worry about over leveraging in hockey more than I don't worry about over leveraging in any sport because you can play like a lineup on a bigger slate, a lineup full of 3 to 8% owned players and be totally fine with that. Whereas that's in most other sports, if you do that, you're probably over leveraged.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree.
Um,
Anyway, I'll let you guys
anyway,
get
the
on
other
the
thing I'll say that is really soft, just so people who aren't aware and haven't been seeing my nearly nightly random screenshot, is that I really think Showdown for hockey is very, very soft.
Oh yeah.
Like I think I've kind of like gotten decent at it, but I think it's mostly that it's really soft. Um, it's like the niche of the niche, right? uh, so anyway, if anybody ever wants to talk Showdown on game, it's really like pretty straightforward. So but the first question is always, are you playing the goalie or not? If you're playing the goalie, you're captaining him or not, and then it's just correlating after that with whatever high upside plays you can get, and then usually finding one or two punts that are either on a forward line or on the power play. That's what it comes down to.
Cake, bud. Cake.
Cool. All right. Oh, hey, James, before I forget, do you think you might be able to add at some point to at least NHL, but I think people might want this in other sports too, um, like a live Vegas total for each team? Like just the Vegas total, like what their total is. I know that you're not, I know that a lot of your models don't work around totals, but it's still, I think, useful to know what the totals are.
Yeah, I mean, I have all that on the back end. Like I have in NFL, I have the team totals included in the stacks. So yeah, I have all that stuff on the back end. I don't mind including it.
Yeah. I think there's just like a page it's like Vegas totals that you could just click on and sort from highest to lowest. That's like literally. It came to mind today because I usually use the Fantasy Labs one because it's free and it allows you to sort. But today, for whatever reason, probably because Fantasy Labs continues to crumble, like all their Vegas totals are fucked up. Like they're all like weird numbers that don't make any sense.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I should build that. I really should because I have all of that data on the back end. So I probably
Cool.
should.
Yeah. All
Good
right.
idea.
All right. Mike, you want to think through things, and then obviously anybody else who wants to chime in as well. What I was going to do. So I think most people here have played hockey, but the way I think about hockey is I think the puzzle pieces are essentially the lines looking at in a perfect world, you're playing a forward line that's also correlated in the power play. And so what I like to do is I just like to work through teams and look at usually their first two or three lines to see what sticks out, um, either correlation and or pricing wise. And then once we've done that, I feel like the puzzle pieces. You're like, okay, this is what, here are the 4 or 5 pay up lines. Here are the 4 or 5 mid range lines. Here are some of the value plays. And then I personally like to do the game theory after that. Like, so once I know all the puzzle pieces, then consult with the sheets and say, okay, this looks like a team that has a really high median and ceiling. Good 2x, 3x, especially for value lines. I look at 2x and 3x. And then, they're unowned. And usually it's pretty intuitive. I mean, I know hockey ownership isn't perfect, but it's usually pretty intuitive. Like if Colorado is playing and they have a high total, they're going to be owned. Same with Tampa, same with Edmonton. And then once you've done that, then it's a matter of just building various combinations of those puzzle pieces that make the most sense in terms of upside with leverage. It's really very similar to baseball, minus having to figure out pitchers, which is nice because pitcher analysis in baseball is kind of critical and complicated. So if I just start from looking at, and I'll try to do this so like we combine sheets at the same time, so we don't have to just like do game theory at the end. But if we start with like the highest Vegas total, at least before Fantasy Labs got messed up, it looks like it's Toronto. That I don't know if that line's moved at all, but that's who it was this morning. And obviously with Toronto, you're always debating first or second line. It looks like they've reshuffled their second line a little bit and moved Tavares to the third line, which is weird. So probably tonight, if you're playing Toronto, I think you're mostly just focused on probably Marner Matthews, and if you want to include Nyes as a cheapie on the first line, just as long as he doesn't usually do that much, but he is correlated obviously with those guys. He doesn't play in the first power play either; he's on the second power play, and then OEL is correlated with them also on the first power play line. He's 4,200. He hasn't done much this year for the most part, but he is pretty cheap and he's on the first power play, so that always kind of puts him in play. And if we look at the sheets, which I have open, they're the third highest median at a substantially lower price than the two highest medians, which are Tampa Bay and Colorado. And they look a little bit less owned than Tampa Bay and Colorado. So, I think Toronto might be a little bit less owned based on this, and they look like decent value with a high upside. So I don't hate Matthews Marner. If you want to include Nyes or OEL, I think that's in play too. Just be aware that Nyes, both those guys have a pretty low floor, but they're cheap, and if they do anything, they pay off. Mike, any thoughts on Toronto?
Yeah, I think they're one of the top 3 stacks of the night. At least if you're going to pay up, right? I think you can go a bunch of ways with it. Like you said, Tavares he was sick at the beginning of the year, and I don't know what it was. He lost like 20 pounds or something crazy. So he's like getting healthier. I don't know if he's in play for me on the third line there. I think he's still on first power play. So I don't know how expensive he is, but at some point he's going to, come back and put up numbers and get on that second line. He's 6,200, so probably not in play for this. So if you want a power play stack rather than go 2 centers with Matthews Tavares, which I've liked to do in the past, I'd probably go Matthews Marner, OEL, and you could even Nylander that too, or you could go all the way five stack it. Like you could really. Toronto's in a good spot. Robert Thomas, not the Matchbox 20 singer, the center. He's injured. He fractured his foot or something. He's out. He's their best player, pretty much. Like all around player. Kairu's their best scorer. So St. Louis has less firepower, and it's not like a game in football. But sometimes, like I wonder if St. Louis isn't going to counterpunch them, and it's not going to be a power play fest. Is the game going to get there, or could Toronto, Matthews have, a goal and an assist and 3 shots and not get you there? So
Yeah,
I think about all those things. But all that being said, I like Toronto a lot, and I think you either can just go for line one. Nyes is cheap enough where he makes a lot of sense, right? He might get 2 assists and 2 shots on goal, but that's all you'll need of him. If
Yeah.
Matthews 2 of those goals, Marner gets a goal, and now your whole line, and now you're cranking. So yeah, I like Toronto. On the St. Louis side, I think Shen moves up and to the first line, but he's still 4,600. I don't know. Like I
Yeah.
can't get excited about St. Louis, so
No,
it's
no,
Toronto or
no.
nothing for me.
Yeah, and in terms of what the sheets think, again, from a stack perspective, they look like they've got a good range of outcomes at a lower ownership. Um, Individually, the guy who sort of sticks out besides Matthews, who always sticks out, is probably Nylander. He's off to a good start. Sheets kind of agree with my take that Nyes and OEL both have pretty low medians and pretty low floors. So just, I don't think it's wrong because, sometimes those PPs are just like the easiest way to get some value in your line. But just, I don't feel the need to include either one of the cheapies. And I do like your point for Toronto. This is anecdotal, but they're one of those teams that, um, you know, uh, tend to get production. It's not that uncommon for Matthews to go off, but also Nylander to have a big game. And sometimes that's because they're on the power play, but sometimes it's just that the first and second line do stuff. So that's an example of what James, I think, was saying before too, is like, overfitting. I don't, it doesn't have to be like the fact that, it's so important to keep in mind that Nylander produces. And even if you're playing Matthews and Marner, it's okay to play Nylander, that he's usually will produce in the game Matthews is producing. Sometimes it's correlated because they're on the power play together. So you don't need to go crazy about every forward line guy being on the power play. You don't have to go crazy that Nylander's not on the same forward line as Matthews. The next line that we'll go through here is just from a total is New Jersey. Sheets have them decently behind Tampa, Colorado, Toronto. So from a sheet standpoint, they've got a bit of a lower total. They are cheaper. Bratt, Hughes, Palat are 17.4K as opposed to, Toronto being 20.4 and Colorado and Tampa both being around 24K. So they do offer substantial salary relief, but their 2X and 3X don't suggest that salary relief is that valuable for what it's worth. So, New Jersey's been weird so far, right? Everybody sort of expects them to be a wagon. It's fun to play Jack Hughes. Bratt often is a producer, but I don't know. Like they're not off to like a super hot start. Sheets don't think they're great. I don't know what about Detroit. I don't know if we have enough sample yet. And I know the sheets factor in defensive matchups, so I don't want to overweight. I don't want to overweight stuff. I usually look at natural stat trick to just look at like high danger chances, expected goals for, expected goals against. I know that's all included in the models, so I think it's important that that's just context and you're not, double counting. But for what it's worth, New Jersey's got like a better offense on the year, and Detroit is like, in terms of expected goals against, one of the top 5 worst. So, very small sample. I don't know that even is worth even I debate whether it's even worth mentioning, but I don't know that they're a priority. I think they're fine based on the sheets. I'm not too excited about them. I whistled Dawson Mercer had some games last year that were pretty productive at times. He's only 3.4K, so you could do worse than him and Timo Meyer on their line too for value. And that's kind of like the only thing that really sticks out on New Jersey for me is that second line because of Mercer mostly. And I guess it depends on where you look, whether that's first or second line. But that's Mike, any thoughts on New Jersey?
Yeah, Detroit has been pretty bad with the high danger, like you were saying, and goals against. Which makes me want to attack them. And this is a team that everyone would love to attack a bad defensive team against. So I don't know. I'm struggling with them because I don't like their power play. I don't like Stefan Nason on the first power play. Like I'd love it if Meyer was on the first power play, because then it would make my decision a little bit easier. I could almost do, like New Jersey. I like to double center if I'm going to play them, because Heischer's really good, and Jack Hughes is the trigger man, and they can both get there, and they both, they're one of the few teams I like to double center stack from. But I would love to do Heischer, Hughes, Bratt, and Meyer as a 4-man, and then I get everything from line 1 and 2 that I want. But my Timo's not on the first power play, and that just screws up my whole idea. And then I'm like, well, maybe I Dougie Hamilton, and I can go that I don't mind that, doing like Bratt, Hughes, Heischer, and Hamilton, and just hopefully Nason doesn't get like that garbage rebound goal, and like, why didn't I just play him too? But that's how I'm thinking about New Jersey.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think they're fine. I think we both feel like they're fine. I don't know if it's a super priority, but it's a team that has a high total against I think a team that we consider to be fairly bad defensively. Next down in terms of totals is the Rangers. Mike, I feel like you're the Rangers whisperer. You kind of know they're hard to get right because it's sometimes it's line 1, sometimes it's line 2. It's sort of similar to when a couple years ago, we never knew if it was going to be Matthews or Tavares. And I'm sure Toronto will get back there this year when Tavares is healthy. But, the Rangers are just one of those teams that they're off to a really great start in terms of offense. I mean, they've got the highest expected goals for, and Florida, I think, is obviously, defending champions, I think fairly stout defensively. So I don't know that matchup wise, it sticks out. Range of outcomes wise, it certainly does not stick out. The first line Rangers is, just as expensive as Toronto won, but decently far below them. In terms of median, although in terms of 2x, 3x, they're pretty similar. So I don't know that for a point per dollar standpoint, they actually look fine. In terms of how they're correlated, you've got Trocheck, Panarin on together on the power play as well. They're pretty pricey. I mean, Panarin has been on fire, but he's 9.1K. Trocheck is 6.7. And then you've got Kreider with Zibanejad, who are much cheaper. I mean, their price sort of sticks out to me a little bit. Kreider's 5.9, Zibanejad 6.1. I don't know. I mean, those are not like crazy prices for those players. And it is, when the Rangers go off, it's not uncommonly those two guys. So I don't know. I guess maybe it's a little cute not just to play Panarin if you play the Rangers, but I think you could do worse than Kreider and Ziv at their pricing. But I can't say that the sheets think they're like amazing, but they don't look bad.
Yeah, the Rangers, you can really go a bunch of different ways. It's Florida, so I tend to want to stay away, but I mean, you can make an argument for the Trocheck Panarin line, because Panarin's on fire. Zibanejad, Kreider, Smith, which used to be line 1, now line 2, it's all the same. They're underpriced. And then line 3 with Hedel, Kakko, and Cooley actually, is starting to gel. So if you want to get your value, you can get it from the Rangers. If you want to get your main stack, you can get it from the Rangers. And you could even get, like Pablo. I think I told you not to play Schneider, which I feel like a jerk.
No, I still played him in one of my lineups in a cash.
There we go. I'm like, yeah, Lindgren's back or whatever.
He scored twice, I think.
Yeah, he got a goal and an assist. Yeah. So
yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
For 3,100, I mean.
And to your credit, I never would have considered playing him had you not answered that he was a puntable defense. I wouldn't even looked at him. So you still get credit.
But yeah, so you could even play, some defense. Like the thing with Fox is I love to play Fox. He's so talented, but he went 4 games without a shot. Like he didn't shoot at all. Like, and if you're going to pay over 500 or 5,000 for a defenseman, he's got to have at least some floor, at least in my opinion. Yeah. And if he's not going to, and Fox isn't a shot blocker.
I can't play Fox right now. He hasn't done anything in 6.3. He's just like not producing.
Yeah. He's coming down a little bit, but he still needs to come down more. But like, I mean, he finally shot the puck twice on net last game and got an assist, but they scored 7 goals and he was part of one of them. So And
Yeah.
Trouba's too expensive. So I think with the Rangers, you would go Miller, Schneider if you're going defense. And then you could really make an argument for any one of the top three lines, or you could just fade the game. I'm leaning on fade the game because I'd hate to like recency bias go to line 3 when they just had one good game, and I do like some more value that we'll talk about. But
Yeah.
the Rangers are tough because any one of their top 3 lines can win you a slate.
Yeah, I think if I played them, and I probably won't, but if I did, I mean, the interesting thing, and this is where the sheets can be really helpful for every sport, is like while I was looking at median, I start with just median and then ceiling. And if you sort the sheets by median and ceiling, nothing in New York really stands out a whole lot. But then if you sort by 2x, which is a great way of looking at value in terms of point per dollar, believe it or not, the only stack over 20K, meaning the only pay up stack that has a 2x over 55% is Rangers 1, Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere. So, I do think it's one of those situations where it's like a contrarian pay up stack. Like most people will not be trying to get Trocheck, Panarin because of the matchup, because we like Toronto, because Colorado's on the slate. Tampa's on the slate, which we'll talk about. So I do think it's worth pointing out, like you can probably get Trocheck, Panarin at a pretty, given the matchup and given the alternatives, at probably pretty low ownership. And I think it's kind of like one of those things of like, oh shit, like I got Panarin at 8% and he scored a hat trick, right? So I do think it's an interesting contrarian pay up line. And I think it probably, if they go off, you get a lot of benefit there. I'll just say that.
Yeah,
I
and
would,
you could actually play like Zibanejad, Kreider, Panarin. Like Trocheck is not necessarily at 6,700. That's a lot for Vincent Trocheck. So Zibanejad at 6,100, if you wanted to, you can mix and match there, and that way you get your power play correlation without playing an overpriced Fox. So you can do that too.
Yeah, James, what were you saying?
Yeah, I just want to jump in really quick to kind of flesh something out here really quick. If you use the research sheets, which I think we haven't talked about much because it's kind of still early in the season, but if you use the research sheets, I think that you can find, if we're talking about the Rangers, right? As it stands now, based on the data that we have, they, against Florida, have the second highest high danger Corsi for environment, which is this last column that I sort this by.
I think it's the highest.
It's second highest, right behind Toronto versus Florida. And the reason for that is because Florida just gives up a bit more in terms of high danger Corsi, whereas Florida does not. So Toronto has the highest, and then the New York Rangers have the second highest. So the New York Rangers do, however, to your point, have the highest high danger for.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking at high danger 4, not Corsi.
I think that's worth saying when you're talking about paying up. Like the opportunity for a lot of goals is really important for high danger environments overall. The other thing that I think is important that I always look at with research sheets is the game pace. And they do have the highest game pace by a long shot. So you can think of that kind of similarly to two NFL teams that like to pass the ball a lot. There's just going to be a lot of opportunities for both sides.
Yeah.
And so when you have a really high game pace, you end up having a really nice floor. You can expect more block shots, you can expect more shots on goal, you can expect more goal opportunities, stuff like that. And that's to be said the same thing for goalies. If you're not going to use one of the Rangers or Florida, like that game pace is really, really high. You should expect a lot of shots to fly in that game. So I wanted to point those things out. And then I also wanted to say with the research sheets, one more thing here, because I use the research sheets a lot when I play NHL. Looking at the projected goals for a line in the line market shares is really, really valuable. So like when you sort by projected goals, basically what it's doing is it's taking the goals percentage and applying it against their team total, which by the way, there you go, Pablo, there's your team totals. If you use that, you're applying that against their goals and you can kind of see like, all right, well, Dallas 2, based on their goals percentage, that is a free stack. Like they're 10.8 on DraftKings, and they're projected for 1.29 goals. Like that's up there with LA 1, New Jersey 1, it's above Florida 1, Carolina 1. Like it's above a lot of these highline stacks, and then the Kings 3. Now the Kings 3 with LaFury, I think that people are going to be kind of on that. Like that's probably going to be one of the more popular lines to use for value. But using those two things, I think in terms of looking at game pace and looking at projected goals, I think those are two really, really nice ways to look at finding line exposure and upside.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And James, in terms of while we're on the sheets, the goals percentage, right? So you've got shots, high danger chances for goals, max goal percentage, projected goals, right? The goals next to so not projected goals, not max goal percentage, but goals, and it shows a percentage. Is that the percentage of goals that comes from that line for that team, or am I interpreting that the wrong way?
Yes, that's what that is. And then the L14 goals is over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. So that gives you a sense for where your production is coming from in terms of goals for a given team. And to your point, like, yeah, Dallas 2 is getting 42% of the goals for that team, and they're only 10.8K. So that's why they're going to continue to pop in terms of value.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly right.
Cool. Okay, that's super helpful. And yeah, we should. I appreciate you pointing out the research sheets, because it's probably something that the site offers in terms of real major value. Probably the most underutilized part of PayDirt is probably the research sheets overall in general. I mean, I know we used it a lot for baseball, but I think in general people are like mostly using the range of outcomes and a few of the other tools like the pivot finder, the Sims, but people just often don't even look at the research sheets.
Yeah, which is funny because, and I'll let you guys get back to it in a sec. I think that the research sheets at PayDirt are some of the most valuable things that are offered, and they're free. Like a lot of them are free. And maybe that's a mistake, because honestly, like I could charge for just the research sheets. So if you're not using them, you absolutely should be.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to use them more now for hockey for sure. So next team total is Carolina. I always sort of hate playing Carolina. I think that's well known for people who have been on these before, because my analogy for them is just that they're like the Patriots of whenever it was that James White was on them. You never know where their production is gonna come from, and I just feel like they never nuke enough to really make it worth your while. But that's clearly a bias I have that I try to combat, because it's probably not totally accurate. I will say that Aho, Svechnikov, Jarvis are really cheap. Jarvis 4.9, Svech 5.3, Aho 6.4. And then line 2, you've got Roslovic, who's a punt 3.1, and Kotkaniemi's 2.9. Probably the most popular play in the early going from Carolina has been actually Gus to be here, or Ghost, as a lot of people call him, the D-man who plays on the first line. He's been pretty darn productive so far this year.
Pablo,
I don't.
The lines changed. They're changing the lines in Carolina. Might help you get off of them even more. It's Svechnikov, Aho, Roslovic is line 1, and Kotkaniemi, Natchez, and Robinson line 2, and Jarvis is line 3 with Stahl and Martinuk. So
yeah, I mean, it just makes me not want to play them. I mean, I guess I don't hate like a Ghost mini with like one of the first line power play guys, so Ghost Jarvis or Ghost Aho, Ghost Fetch. But I think he's probably like the most attractive play on the team from my standpoint. In terms of projected goals, to James' point, since I've got that loaded up, they're kind of upper middle of the pack with the first line. In terms of range of outcomes, Carolina, I don't see any of their. Yeah, they're not. None of their lines are like top 15 even. So, I mean, if we go to just individual player range of outcomes for Carolina, and I realize that next time what I'll do is I'll share my screen, so as we do this, we can people can see what I'm looking at. Yeah, none of the players like really stick out a ton in terms of range of outcomes. Marty Natras is got a decent 2x, and then Roslovic is okay. And even Ghost is getting a little more pricey. So anyway, I'm fine with them. I don't think they're a priority. I think I don't think it's crazy to do a mini. And then in terms of matchups on the research sheets, high danger chances against Calgary's not bad, not great. They're top 5 or 6 worst, but there's like a big group in the middle of the pack that are all pretty close. And then high danger chances 4, I will say Carolina's been pretty good. So I don't think it doesn't seem like it's a terrible matchup. Game pace is also, 5th best on the slate. So I don't hate it. I just don't know that's a priority. And I think because of the line reshuffling, it makes correlation really hard. And I'd be more prone to doing like a mini with Ghost and one of those first line players. But Mike, feel free to chime in. I think you don't hate Carolina as much as I do in general.
I mean, other than the fact that they were the Whalers and they moved to Carolina, I hate them for that. But as a team now, like I don't mind playing them. I actually don't mind the value of Natchez. I think that him and Kotaniemi. I think Kotaniemi is a hard name to say, but he's 2,900, so that's good. I don't know if I would play Robinson, who is now on the left wing for like min price. They're actually not a bad value line. I would label the best value lines of the slate: Dallas 2, LA 3, and then Carolina 2 would be my top 3 value lines. So you could play a mini of Natchez, Kotaniemi, and you could put Gossespierre on there. I know Kotaniemi's not in the first power play, but he's on the second. And so that's
Do you
not
still
bad.
do you still like Ghost at 4.5K, or do you think he's getting to be too much?
I think that's fine, right? Because he's got a great floor. I mean, if you look just at his last 4 games, like he's shooting a ton. So as long as it isn't a slugfest, but Carolina shoots from anywhere. So I think you can play Carolina value here, or you could even play Vladar and hope for the save bonus on the other side. I know we don't talk too much, but that's in play too. At 7,500, Carolina might shoot 38 times and score 3 times, and he'll be fine. So
Yep.
that's how I feel. But I don't like anybody in Calgary. But yeah, Carolina, I really like that second line. I don't think I'm going Aho, especially since you can't stack him how you want to. I mean, he is 6,400. He's a lot less, but yeah, I don't think I'm playing line 1. I'm playing line 2 if I'm playing.
Cool. And that was a good seg in terms of the value, because you mentioned one of the teams that has the next highest total, which is the Kings. They will be popular because they're playing against San Jose, who I think is widely regarded as the worst team in the league. And the Kings are not crazy pricey. If we look at them in terms of a range of outcomes from the lines, both LA1 and LA2 stick out in terms of their median and their ceiling. Both look like pretty strong 2x and 3x for pay up lines. They're not even that pricey. I mean, LA1 is 18K and LA2 is 15.4. And of the teams over 17K, LA1 is the best, and it kind of makes sense given the matchup. So I'd imagine they're going to be fairly popular. In terms of correlation, they do also correlate decently. You've got Anze Kopitar and Kempe. By the way, I'm very proud of my pronunciation of these names. It is a tribute to how much hockey I've watched the last 3 years that I know most of these guys' names now.
That's
awesome. It's kind of like sad, but also cool at the same time.
Never said.
So anyway, Kempe Kopitar I think is fine. Then you've got Sheets Darlings, I think not from last year, but from the year before. I feel like we played a ton of Deneau Moore, the second line. And or are they are we considering them the third line today? Are we considering them third line that we're saying is such great value? No, we're saying Laferriere, Fogela, Turcotte is the value line.
3, yeah, basically. So that's why. And Lafreniere's on the first power play. So
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know that there's a whole lot to say other than it's, they're playing they're playing the Sharks. Um, I don't know. I mean, I will say this. I mean, I'm fine with it. They project fine. But I just will say, like, I don't consider it to be that different than like Winnipeg is heavy chalk. Like Winnipeg has been heavy chalk multiple times already this season against so to good matchups, and they've kind of busted. I think that's more a tribute to just hockey being sort of random and volatile. Um, so I'll just say that like I don't think like it's like you have to have LA. Like it's not like oh my god, like LA's playing the Kings, like I have to play them. Um, I think they're fine. I think both LA1 and LA2 project really well. I think from a 2x, 3x standpoint, you know, believe it or not, 2x, 3x, LA3 doesn't even, it's not cracking the top of the sheets for what it's worth, which I think is more a tribute to just that line not having done that much. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's fine if you really want to go dumpster diving, but I'd probably be more inclined based on the data we're seeing here to play at line 1 or line 2. And I guess that's where I'm at. I do think that like line 2 will be, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like Dano Moore will be probably decently less owned than Kempe Kopitar. I could be wrong about that, but it's one of those situations where it wouldn't be that surprising to see Dano Moore score the goals and then people be mad that they played line 1. But what do you think,
yeah,
Mike?
yeah, I'm with you. I think you can play. I think I like line 2 better than line 1. I don't love Dano as a scorer. He's a great two-way center, but he's 3,900. So I think that he's easy to put in. I think that if you're gonna play line 1 or line 2 or Lafreniere on line 3, you're playing Clark at D at
I was
4,400.
about to say that. I was about to bring that up because he's kind of like the ghost of the West, right?
Yeah, yeah. Gossespierre or Clark, I think are solid plays. Clark's going to be like 30% owned on a 9-game slate. So but I think you eat that and that's fine. I think he's going to be part of their scoring, and he's 4,400 and he fits in at D. I think he's a no brainer if you're playing any Kings at all. So plug him in.
Yeah.
Fiala, I like line 2 a little better than line 1. This is King's first home game. I don't understand why they're on the road for like ever, but the first home game against the Sharks, it's a pretty nut spot. Um, I don't know. I actually like kind of forgot about this game until you just brought it up, and I'm like, it's the Sharks. They're so bad. They're just literally like playing. What is the equivalent in baseball of stacking against the crappy team or playing Coors or something?
Yeah, they're like playing against like like stacking against the Rockies at home. I mean, they're
Yeah,
not that bad. They're not that
against
bad,
the
but
Star,
it's
yeah.
kind of like that.
Yeah, no, the Sharks are bad. Like every other team, like you can see like the Kraken winning a game, you can see Utah winning games like in the West, and the East is the East. The Sharks are like a different level bad. So um they're Kings are in a good spot, but they could score 6 goals and it could be balanced scoring and you don't need any of them. You don't need any Kings to win. So that's what's great about hockey, and what's frustrating is like, you know, anything can happen. So but Kings are in a good spot. I like line 2.
Cool. Moving on to the next total, we have Tampa. What I think is interesting about Tampa, and I'm trying to see right now if the research sheets confirm this or not, is that it does feel like they've been fairly concentrated to line 1. By far the highest median and highest ceiling on the slate on the range of outcomes. So you're getting a lot of ceiling in Tampa. If we go to line market shares and I sort by shots percentage, they're like the right behind Colorado one in terms of the shots they take. They're top 2 in terms of high danger chances for. They are 4th in goal percentage at 50%. So, and they're 2nd in terms of projected goals. So It's just, it's not sneaky. They have been, I think, off to a fairly productive start. I think Gunsel has fit in pretty well. You are paying a price. It's definitely a pay up. You're not getting them. You're going to need value to play them because every piece of them is expensive. Cooch is 9.4. It's similar to like Panarin. Like he's usually going to produce. Gunsel 7.2, Point 7.4. Hedman is 6.5 if you want to play the first power play with him. And I think that's like all you're playing from Tampa. Like you're not looking at second or third line. I mean, I don't hate Hagel at 5.1, but it's a little pricey. And I don't feel the need to play any of their cheapies. I mean, I will say Nicholas Paul at 3.8K is pretty cheap, but I don't think he's a priority in any way. And in terms of matchups, in terms of we look at the research sheets, high danger chances against Minnesota's middle of the pack, and then high danger chances for Tampa's near the top. So and then game pace, it looks sort of middle of the pack. So nothing crazy matchup wise. I think it's more just you're just saying Tampa Bay produces, and they're them in Colorado are kind of like the big boy pay up lines that produce the majority of their team's goals.
Yeah, I mean,
they will be. They're projecting to be the chalkiest pay up for what it's worth.
Really, I don't know.
That's what the sheets say. I don't know. It is an 8 or 9 game or whatever. So I don't think you need to sweat it that much. But they will be owned.
Yeah, I don't know. I keep waiting for Tampa to kind of like come down to come down to earth.
You've been waiting a long time, my man. It's Tampa.
I know. You're a Tampa guy. I don't know. Like I feel like they're on the downswing now, but then they're not. And they just like they lose Stamkos and they're still the Lightning. I kind of like the Wild too on the other side. Joel Eriksson Ek is back and he's a great, two-way player. And so I don't know, this game could either like, if I'm going to play it in one of my 6 that I'm making, I'm either going to like game stack it and just hope there's like a power play fest. Like James was talking about with a game that shoots out. Like you can look for those games in DFS for NHL and kind of, I think it's like I tend to think like if a referee's going to call penalties, they're going to feel like they need to make the call them on the other side. And when games get that way, and all of a sudden you'll look and you'll see, all right, 6 power play chances on both sides. It really does happen. I don't have any strong data for that, but like I like to think of like, all right, if there's going to be power plays on both sides, what game could benefit from that? Then look at the total. And then look at the pace, and then and kind of go from there. And this game could very well be like something like that. The problem is you can't play power play stack both sides; they're too expensive because Kaprizov's almost as expensive, I think, as Kucherov. Let me see how. Yeah, he's 8,900. So all that to say, like I like this game, but I'm either gonna probably get pieces from both sides or fade it. Hagel's a good play, like you said. Hedman is more involved in the power play now without Stamkos there. And I think Getzel finally got there for the first time this year. I mean, I know you said he's doing well, but the first, couple games, he's...
Well, I think I'll say this. I'll say this about him as a watcher of Tampa.
Yeah.
I think he's a better real life hockey player than he is a fantasy hockey player. He's like he shares the puck. Like he's a very, like guys like playing with him because he's a very he's like not a selfish guy. I don't know. I think that's different than being a super productive guy. I think he's still finding his place, but I think he's always sort of been like that, right? He's always been like sort of a good feeder to Crosby and now probably to Cooch and to Point.
Yeah, and he doesn't need to be the scorer as much as he did on the Penguins because Cooch and Point are there, so he can have those, lower games, but I mean, he had 9 shots last game, so he's starting to kick it in. They have that void without Stamkos, so they need to figure out their power play without him. They had Radish on their line or power play for a while. Now it's Hagel, and I don't know.
How do you feel about Hedman as a pay up in D because he's expensive, but he's on the first line on the first power play?
Yeah, he's 65. He's almost like at this point now. Like if he was 55, I'd like him a lot more, obviously. But like he's so close to Getzel now. Like if you're gonna play Kucherov in point, I mean, if you really need that savings, but it's not as much as it was a couple games ago. So he's creeping up there. I don't hate him though. I mean, yeah, you can go
Yeah.
Hedman, save a couple bucks from Gensel. So you go point Kucherov, Hedman. You could go Kucherov, Hedman, Hagel, maybe even. But now you're getting a little too cute. Now you're kind of like sprinkling two lines in your D. I don't know. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fair. Yeah. It's just something you ask yourself. Because you're almost always going to play point Cooch, and then you're just debating: do you play two man or do you play Hedman or Gunsel with one of them? And the nice thing about the D man is like it's always nice to check off. It's kind of like tight end; like it's always nice to check off the D man box in a way that correlates. Um, okay, next we have Colorado. It's the Avs. I think they've been fine offensively. They've just been really bad defensively. And I think a lot of that is mostly goalie based. They've just been getting scored on like every single game. I'm sure hockey watchers like you might give me other reasons why from a deep perspective, but for whatever reason they're getting scored on. Mac is 9.8, Miko is 9, Makar is 8.5, so very very pricey. Colton remains underpriced at 5.4K. He's just like for whatever reason he's not coming up, even though he's producing pretty much every time they score on the first line, or a lot of the time. So yeah, I mean, because they're so pricey, their 2x and 3x are not as attractive as Toronto or Tampa. So their 2x and 3x is just lower than Tampa and Toronto, and it's not that their median and ceiling is any different, because their median and ceiling is right behind Tampa. It's just that they're pricey. So I think certainly we talked about market share and the fact that they're line one, just like Tampa. They're very similar versions of each other in terms of their market share. They end up scoring all the goals. In terms of matchup wise, game pace is middle of the pack, not bad, not great, and they're getting plenty of high danger chances, and Seattle's middle of the road in terms of how many high danger chances they're allowing. So yeah, I mean, I think the hard thing with Colorado is just clearly their price, and you're not playing Makar, Miko, McKinnon. There's no way to do it usually. So you're usually playing two of them with Colton. I've been mostly doing Makar when I play them. I'm usually playing McKinnon. I think it's just like it's too cute to me if you're playing Colorado not to play McKinnon. And the way I've been using them mostly has been with Makar and then Colton. So if I'm playing them, I'm probably doing that. Probably playing McKinnon, Makar, Colton. I don't think you're crazy if you play Miko over Makar, but even at $500 when you're paying up for McKinnon at 9.8K is a lot. And Colton's the one who sticks out the most pricing wise. I don't think McKinnon at 9.8 is nuts. Miko at 9 is tough, and Makar even at 8.5 is tough. So yeah, I think they will be owned because there's enough value that you can make it work. But just you're definitely going to need good value if you're playing Colorado 1, and those are my thoughts. What do you think?
yeah, I'm with you. I tend to like to play Makar. He's the least owned out of the big three: McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar. But I mean, he's basically like a fourth forward when he's out there. He'll be behind the goal in the offensive zone half the time. So he's one of those rare defensive players that's so offensive, like you barely can call him a defenseman. He's 500 cheaper than Rantanen. Utah, they like to skate and play up tempo. I think I was saying in the chat earlier today that I like this game stack as well, and it's just tough, right? Because I think you need to play Colton, and I think you basically said it, right? You need to play McKinnon, Colton, Makar, and then it's just a matter of are you bringing anything back on the Utah side, and I like Cooley and Gunther, that line a lot, because Keller's pretty expensive. So yeah, it's a really good game environment, and I want to have Colorado. But if you're gonna play Colorado, you're gonna need like that super value line. So I the one line I made with them today I played them with Carolina 2, which has got 2,900 coaching Miami on it.
You can also, the value line that's going to be probably chalky because they're just so fucking cheap. And to James's point before, they're producing plenty of the goals. Is Dallas too? I mean, Duchesne, Marchment, Sagan are just like they're all. Sagan is 3.2, Marchment is 3.5, and Duchesne is 4.1. It's like just stupid cheap. So, and I know Boston, isn't a team that you necessarily want to attack, but they haven't done anything to be that scared of so far. I mean, and it's also priced into their cheap. So, but yeah, I mean, you're going to need to find whatever value line you like, Carolina, Dallas, LA, whoever else, if you're going to play Colorado 1. But it's not impossible. I mean, it's not hard to do Colorado 1 with Dallas 2. It's really not.
No,
so
I think Makar over Rantanen is the play. But Rantanen.
I agree. And if Moose beats you, it is what it is. I mean, it's just the savings if you're playing McKinnon already are worth it to me to just go down to Makar, especially at a position in D where the alternatives are like either you're trying to get a good value guy. There's very few D-men who can nuke like Makar. He's like one of the only D-men who can break a slate. So there's an opportunity cost in fading. It's like playing not this year with football, but like last year to some degree and the year before. It would be like when you would pay up for one of the elite tight ends. This year it hasn't panned out that way for football. I know, but I know it's apples and oranges a little bit, but it's similar game theory, which is that it's a position you have to play, and it's one of the only guys at that position who can really burn you if you don't play him. If that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Minnesota, and then I'll try to speed through the rest a little bit because I know people probably don't want to listen for much more than an hour, and we're getting to some of the lower totals. Minnesota is the next one. They are playing at Tampa. They are you've got Zuccarello, Kaprizov on the first line and in the first power play. You got Faber, who was really good last year on the first line power play, and then you've got Eck, Boldy, who are actually pretty pricey, 7.1, 7.3 on the second line, and also on the first power play. Nothing really sticks out from the third or fourth lines on them. So decently correlated with those two guys and Faber on the first power play. Their 2x is pretty gross in terms of at least Minnesota 1 because Zuccarello, Kaprizov are so expensive. Their 2x is really low as a pay up. So that kind of makes me pretty cool on them. And then Minnesota 2x looks a little bit better. So it looks like Sheets kind of like Eck Boldy over Kaprizov. And game pace wise, it looks, we've already talked about Tampa. It's middle of the road. You've got, I think, Vazzy, which I know goalies are random, but never really loved picking on him. Granted, I'm a bit of a homer, so take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, you're not going to get any value out of the Wild tonight. Like line 1 and line 2 are super expensive. So you really like them, you can play either one, but there's no like sneaky play out of the Wild. Maybe you can the Zuccarello, Kaprizov, but you're paying a lot for those two. But they're very correlated. They work together, and usually if one's gonna hit their ceiling, the other one's coming along.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Minnesota is kind of whatever. I don't know. Not a priority for me. Utah is next. You talked kind of about liking. You talked. That's a tough one. You talked. Utah's been good so far. I mean, they've been productive and exciting to watch, and playing games like you said, they've been up in pace. So it's been kind of a fun team. It's sort of easy to forget that they were Arizona last year, but and then when you remember that, like, oh yeah, Arizona was a team I played a lot last year, and they've made some positive changes. Plus, that seems like a really fun arena. At least opening night when they were showing where the seats are, like there's a couple seats that are like overhanging the ice. It just looks really fun. For what it's worth, I don't know how much that matters for DFS. And yeah, the game pace in that game is fine. I mean, it's upper middle of the pack. Colorado we've talked about has not been great on defense, and Utah has been decent on offense. So I think you could do worse just from a game environment standpoint. They have been priced up quite a bit, and because of that, their range of outcomes is really bad. They're 2x for line one with Schmaltz, Keller, Hayton is very low, 14.14, and then Utah 2 with Gunther, Cooley is a little bit better, 2x, but still pretty bad. So they've been priced in a way that makes them a little tougher to swallow. But I get it if you want to do it. It's just, Keller's 7.7 and Hayton's still pretty cheap at 5K. Kraus had his games last year, right? And he's only 3.7K on the second line. So,
third line, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay, well, yeah, not first line. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's nuts. But it's more of a like I like them than it is a math says I should play them play.
Yeah, I think. Well, Colorado, it's like, do you think they're gonna shore up, the holes that they've had in defense? They've been like one of the worst teams defensively. So, is that going to stop? And Utah, are they going to continue to fire? And is it going to be a track meet game? Is basically like I don't know. I think I like line 2, that mini, but with Cooley and Gunther. Yeah, it's Sergachev's interesting, but he's 5,400, so he's priced fairly. You can always play him with the mini on line 2 or with line 1. Keller is the best player on their team, and he's appropriately priced for that. He's 7,700, that's not 9,100 or whatever Kaprizov was. So there is a difference in price, and Keller's going to play as many minutes as Kaprizov. He plays 20, 21 minutes. So you could go line 1 or line 2. I like both. But yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Cool. Detroit, Florida, Winnipeg. Detroit hasn't been terribly exciting so far this year. Their first line with DeBrincat, Raymond, and Larkin are not terribly overpriced. They're actually pretty cheap. Raymond's 4.4, Kat's 5.6, Larkin's 5.9. So similar to kind of Carolina pricing, fairly middle of the road. And then you've got Terchenko, who's really cheap on line 2 at 3.5, and JT Compher, who's also 3.5. So that's like another punt value line that's akin to the pricing on Dallas too. In terms of the sheets actually think that Detroit 1 is one of the strongest plays on the slate. Their 2x is the third best on the slate and the only team in that 2x range, anywhere near their price. Like the other 2x teams up there are like punt teams. So, which tells you that for 15.9K, Larkin, Raymond, Cat are projecting to be really, really strong value. Now they're also projecting as the third highest owned line on the slate, which speaks to the fact that it's probably not super sneaky. In terms of matchups, game pace is one of the slower games, so it could be a bit of a slog. And New Jersey hasn't been giving up a crazy amount of high danger chances, but they're not tough defensively either. And then Detroit has been pretty low on the high danger chances. And then line market share wise, their goal percentage for Detroit is a little bit more spread out. Their goal percentage is like roughly the same. It's exactly the same 33% from line one or line two. So you are kind of picking which one you like better there from a goal percentage, but it's more just that they're priced in a way that makes them very attractive, whether you're playing, line one or line two. So I think from a value standpoint, they're interesting for sure, and I understand why they're going to be owned. But it's not like I like want to pick on New Jersey, but to some degree, the pricing mitigates whatever concerns you have about the matchup. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't think Detroit will be the third highest owned stack of the night, just because there are value lines that people are going to want to play that are cheaper, and they're going to go with stars and scrub build. I think because there's enough big scores other than McDavid. There's like all the big boys are on this slate between Kaprizov to McKinnon to Matthews to Pastrnak to all of that. So I think a lot of people are going to go like cheap line two and a big pay up line, and I think Detroit might get like forgotten a little bit.
Squeezed. Yeah.
Like Detroit 1, like LA Kings 2 might be the winning lineup because of, you just have to have more balanced builds with Detroit than you would going another route. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's dead on in terms of macro build. I think it's going to be much more common to do Colorado 1 or Tampa 1 or Toronto 1 with a Dallas 2 or an LA Kings. And by the way, one way to do it is you can play Detroit. You can play Detroit, Comfort, Terchenko for 3.5K each, right? So you can use them as your value if you want. But I do agree that's going to make line one and line two, or line one rather, the Larkin line is going to be. I think they're actually going to get squeezed pricing wise because there's just like if you're playing the pay ups, you can't use them. And most people are going to want to play one of the pay ups. So I think that's a really good call in terms of ownership. So you could go balance build with like a Detroit 1 and another mid-range team like a Utah or Carolina, and have a really different build structure. I like that a little more for a larger field, but I don't think it's crazy either way. Florida's playing against the Rangers. You've got Bennett, Verhaeghe, Kachuk, line one, not crazy priced, but not cheap. Reinhardt's in line two. He's pretty pricey at 7.8K. And then you've got Lundell. Wow, Lundell is like priced up big time. I guess that's a testament to him producing, but he's up to 5.2. It's like, I can't play Lundell at 5.2. And then Lusto is 3.1. So yeah, I mean, it's Florida. They're obviously defending champions. I think they are from a range of outcome standpoint, they're projecting to be okay. They're like 10th highest, but you're kind of they're 21K to play that Bennett, Verhaeghe, Kachuk line, and you're playing them instead of Toronto 1 or Tampa 1 or Colorado 1 at that price, or LA Kings, or New York 1. So it's hard to play them over all those other teams for the range of outcomes against the Rangers. I just feel like, I get it, but it's like, it's like an off the board, like very large field play. I don't think Florida is like a real priority based on the range and based on their price and the alternatives.
We need to cross off some teams. I think tonight is an easy way to, Panthers should be one of the first ones we could probably cross off just from price, who they're playing. Let's just, you got to make some decisions.
Okay. And one of the things we'll do here in a minute when we're closing out is we can sort of give a high level like recap just so that anybody coming at the end knows kind of our big takeaways. But that's a great point, which is like, when you've got a slate that's more than 6 to 7 games, like 8, 9, 10 plus, you just have to start at some point saying like, okay, even if you're MMEing, like there's only so many spots you can cover, but especially if you're hand building a limited set of lineups, you just have to say, okay, these are the teams I'm prioritizing. How do I combine them in the way I like the most? And I'm fine crossing Florida off. Winnipeg is the next total. Velarde 4.6, Connor and Scheifele are on line 1. You've got line 2, which is Nemestikov, Ehlers, Perfetti. Nemestikov and Perfetti are both really cheap. Perfetti's had his moments. Nemestikov occasionally will produce. Morrissey, obviously one of the pay-ups at 6.1K in defense, who is usually in consideration. Winnipeg does not project amazingly well. I put him in a similar category to Florida. Occasionally the Kraken will get into games that are paced up a little bit. And this game does have the second highest pace. So I'm glad that's not just in my head. But I don't know. I just don't, for me personally, I don't think Winnipeg, based on that pricing, cracks my top tier, given the other teams I like a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know. I'm having trouble with this game on both sides. I don't hate these two teams. I don't hate playing them normally, but tonight when they're playing each other, I can't get excited about either side. So I'm kind of crossing off both. I'm playing a little bit of Decord, at goalie, mid-range. So that's obviously going to keep me off Winnipeg. And yeah, it's tough. Like that game could be crazy. I do like a punt D Stanley from Winnipeg at 2,600. I put him in a couple places, but other than that, yeah, I'm just not getting there, and I don't know why. I don't have a great reason for why. I'm just not.
Yeah, I will say that it'll probably be because of the price and the matchup. It won't be too owned. Plus, it's a late game. People, I don't know. I think in general, people don't like playing late games as much unless it's a really good spot. So I do think you can get it pretty low owned, but I'm not that excited about it. Besides that, Dallas is kind of the next. Yeah, Dallas is the next team. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say Riker Evans is a good punt on the other side too for D. If we're just thinking of cheap D at the end.
Yep. He's a rookie or second year? I know he's young.
I think he's second year, but he's got a
he's been productive. He's been productive for sure.
Yeah.
I just taking a gander at Seattle because I'm not going to get to them. Probably, I'm not very excited about any of their plays. Next, we have Dallas, which I think is worth mentioning. We've already talked about them a couple of times. Dallas, too, just remains absurdly priced, with Sagan at 3.2, Marchment 3.5, and Duchesne 4.1. Some of that's injury related. Sagan just came back last game for the first time, so he's still just 3.2. They do have a low. They occasionally will do nothing, right? But given their market share and their price, it's just like if you're playing a handful of lineups, I think you'd be remiss not to at least consider a Dallas 2 value line. The range of outcomes is really, really strong. They are, they're just really cheap. Is just what it comes down to. Dallas 1 for that matter also looks fine. You got Rupe, Dirt, Hintz, Jason Robertson, Wyatt Johnson. Their 2X is pretty strong. They are top 5 or 6 in terms of their 2X, and I don't think they're going to be that owned. I think some of this is fear of Boston defense. I could be wrong. Boston's defense has been decent, not amazing, but not bad by any stretch. And Dallas has kind of middle of the road, high danger chances. It does have the slowest pace on the slate, so I think it is worth noting that you're which makes me a little cool. Like if I'm going to play them, I think I'd rather just play them for value than pay up, given the other teams that we like for pay up value for pay up opportunity and ceiling. So to me, it's just Dallas too. The only thing I don't love about Dallas so far this year has been defense has been hard to play. Harley's now really cheap. He's only 4.3. That's because he hasn't been doing much. He did score last game for what it's worth, but last year, especially when Stank came up, for a while they were really strong, but they've been not great on in terms of defensive production. And then Miro Heiskanen is all the way down to 5K now. And that's again also because he just hasn't done anything. Besides last game, he did shoot the puck 7 times, so he produced just on volume, but he didn't score.
Yeah, one thing about their power play is they're actually putting like the second power play unit over the board sometimes first. Their power play is balanced enough where like you kind of question what's the first unit, and that's always dangerous when you're in a pay up situation. Is all right if there's any question on if my guy's on the first unit, like if Rupe, like Hintz and Wyatt, are they the first unit or the second unit? Because Robertson's on the second unit. So when you start to like question that stuff for a line 1 on a big slate like this, that's what gets me off of Dallas 1. And then Dallas 2 being cheap and just a great value, solidifies that. So
yeah, what's surprising a little bit is that even though the research sheets love Dallas 2, the range of outcomes don't, which is it's interesting, right? I mean, that might be partially influenced by game pace being so bad, but the 2x 3x on Dallas 2 is like middle of the pack. It's not near the top. There's a bunch of other value lines lower than 10.8K, which is what the second line on Dallas costs, that project better from a value point per dollar standpoint. I'm willing to veto that based off just like watching Dallas 2 and also Sagan just coming back. And I guess it's a long way of saying that I'm willing to veto it based off of what the research sheets say and sample size. To me, it's just like Dallas 2's price for their amount of involvement in any given game makes them still a very strong play. So, but I'm just pointing out that the range of outcomes do not agree with that take. So it's more of a research sheet / liking Dallas 2 personally approach.
Yeah.
And then I'll just, Calgary, Boston, St. Louis, Seattle, San Jose are the last ones. I don't think any of them stand out in terms of range of outcomes. We talked about Seattle already a little bit. St. Louis, you mentioned them a little bit before. Just not a priority for me. I think Jake Neighbors is only 4.1K. You've got Kyrou and Buchnevich, who occasionally will produce. And who else did you mention? You mentioned the guy who has a name who's not the same as another player in a different sport. Who's that?
Shen? No.
Maybe. No, maybe I'm thinking of Neighbors. I don't know. Robert Thomas, but he's not playing, is he?
No, he's not playing.
Yeah.
He got injured. So he's out for like 6 8.
Yeah, so I just don't. There's nothing on St. Louis that attracts me. Nothing in Seattle that attracts me. Nothing in San Jose that attracts me. So, do you think there's any worth mentioning on those teams? I guess I skipped Boston. Boston, Pasta 8.8. That's about it. I don't know. I'm not gonna play Boston. Not on the slate.
I'm a Bruins fan, and I don't think I'm playing Boston in any of mine. It's tough they're figuring their season out. They're moving their lines around. Marchand at 5,000. Yeah. You could one-off something like that if you want to. But yeah, I think you're getting a little too cute if you're in Boston builds like crazy. So
yeah. So I think, to me, the slate is actually fairly straightforward. Like there's a few pay up lines. It's Tampa, Toronto, Colorado, right? Tampa 1, Toronto 1 plus or minus Nylander or Tavares, Colorado 1. We talked about build structure on Colorado, which is probably Mac, Colton, Makar. I think we agree on that over Mikko. And then neither one of us love New Jersey, but they are a pay up that some people will play. So those are kind of the pay ups, and then there's the Rangers, which is like 1 or 2. Rangers 1 or 2. And I pointed out that Rangers do pop a little bit on the sheets, and James pointed out that the game pace in that game is attractive. So I do think the Rangers 1 or 2 are a bit of a slightly off the board play that will be unowned, and that game could get a little nutty if that game pace goes where the sheets think it will from a research sheet standpoint. Those are kind of the pay ups. You're kind of picking your favorite between Tampa or Colorado because they project very similarly, or you're playing Toronto, or you're playing sort of somewhat more contrarian Rangers. The hard part again with the Rangers is 1 or 2, and then you've got the Kings who are in a good spot against San Jose. I still don't like. I'm not excited to play line 1 there with Kempe Kopitar, especially given I think they're going to be somewhat owned because they're playing against San Jose. But I do think line 2 is interesting, or even punting down to somebody like Warren Fogle at 2.9K as a one-off, or as a mini with someone like Brant Clark is interesting. Mid-range, you've got like Carolina, and the other mid-range team we talked about was Detroit. And the sheets especially like Detroit 1 from a value standpoint. And then value, we talked about New York 3, we talked about Dallas 2, we talked about some of the LA pieces, and then maybe like minis on Carolina with Ghost and one of their cheaper guys. I think to your point before, in terms of macro build structure, the most common approach will definitely be stars and scrubs. I think most people will either pay up for Tampa or Toronto or Colorado, some Rangers, and then play a value line like Dallas 2 or LA cheapies. And that'll be common, which I think will make some of the mid-range plays like Detroit or Carolina, probably, or even New York Rangers too, slightly less of a popular approach. And so if you want to go balance build instead of stars and scrubs, you'll probably have a more unique structure. And I think it's perfectly viable given the range of outcomes that we're seeing today.
Yeah.
Is that a fair summary, or do you think I'm mischaracterizing anything we've sort of discussed?
No, I think you got it pretty well. I would say, overstacking, if you were to do that, and maybe Toronto or LA are where I would go for those because of the big prices, and then there is a little bit of value on both of those teams to add. So if you were to go 4 or even 5, those would be the 2 teams I'd do it on. I don't usually do 5, but I might think about it tonight with LA or Toronto. But other than that, yeah, you've got it, pretty much down. I would say Pesci is back. Just a couple of D punts because you might need him tonight. We talked about Riker Evans on the Kraken. Pesci is back with who the hell does he play for now?
He's in a new team now, right? He's not on Carolina anymore.
The Devils, yeah. You can punt like Rangers, like with Schneider or Mancini, even at 2,600. Logan.
Yeah, the only other power play 1D man that I like to look at when I'm trying to look at punts is Gustav on Detroit. He had his moments last year, and sheets do like Larkin. So you can play him. You can play that first Detroit line with Gustav. He hasn't done a whole lot so far, but he's only 3.4K and on the first power play.
Is he on the first power? I didn't even know that. Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure. Let me double check on Daily Faceoff.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. Sider's in the second. I thought Sider was in the first, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and I'm not wrong, right? Wasn't he on the Rangers last year?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, he was.
And he had his moments.
Yeah, when Fox was injured, he was on power play 1 there too. So
yeah, so I'm not saying it's priority. I'm just saying if you're looking for a cheap D-man punt to correlate with your first line, it's not the craziest thing to do.
And
does anyone have any thoughts on the slate? Questions about hockey in general, or in the slate specifically?
Yeah, I've got a question. I like Detroit 1. Obviously, I see. Is there just not enough in projection to be interested in Detroit 2? Because it seems in the 2X, 3X, etc., that it's kind of interesting.
No, I think Detroit 2. That's one I forgot to use in my summary. When we went through Detroit, thanks for pulling that up, because I did mention it when we talked about Detroit, but I just forgot to mention it just now when we were re-summarizing the slate. I would put Detroit
I was
2.
just I was babysitting these. I just came back.
No, all good. Detroit 2, I think, is squarely in plays a value line. Confer and Terchenko both being 3.5 are really cheap, and Terchenko specifically sticks out quite a bit in range of outcomes. And Detroit 2 is the fourth highest 2x on the slate and is the second highest 3x on the slate. So I think Detroit 2 is right up there with Dallas 2 in terms of value.
Cool. Thanks.
And I don't think you need to play Patrick Kane at all. I think you can play Terchenko Confer. So thanks for bringing that up. That's a great call out that I forgot to bring that up again as a summary. It's mostly driven by Terchenko because his 2x and 3x are really, really strong. Confer the range of outcomes actually don't love Confer. But I think if you're playing Terchenko, you play him as a one-off or just pair him with Confer because Confer's really cheap also. And Confer is the type of player, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but historically he does get involved. He's not like a nobody.
Yeah, I mean, at his price, he's viable to mini with Tarasenko. I think that's fine. Yeah, he's not going to get you a hat trick, but yeah, he's not bad.
Yeah, he might score. He might get you like just 7 points on 3 shots and a block, but he's not commonly like a nothing.
You can always Tarasenko just one off too. You don't need.
You can also just one off him. I agree with that.
Yeah, don't always feel like.
I mean, it's worth pointing out that Tarasenko, like historically, has been considered a really good player. Like he's bounced around a lot, right? This is like his third or fourth team in the last 3 or 4 years. I don't know why that is, but it would be unsurprising to see him be good at some point.
Yeah, 3,500. You can't go wrong with that. So,
what else? Anybody have any other thoughts or questions?
I'll give some last minute thoughts here. This was great. Everybody's smart. You guys fucking rule. I think that, based on everything that you guys said, the only thing that I would say is that on a slate this size, we have 10 games. I think that it's important to maximize your correlation. I talked about this in the chat the other day, and Pablo decided to say, tell it to Gordy, who only stacks 3-mans. Gordy's fucking wrong. Just plain and simple. Like on a 10+ game slate, you need to be maximizing your correlation. You need to have at least one 4-man stack. The chances of a team scoring 6 or more goals, which is kind of like the threshold for when a team ends up being super worthwhile as a stack, it just gets higher and higher and more teams are on the slate. So very similar to baseball, the bigger the slate, the more important it is to maximize your correlation. So you should do that. And to speak really quickly to the Dallas 2 situation, not looking super great in the models, but looking really good in the research stuff. The research stuff only accounts for, the models are not accounting for the research sheets to a significant degree right now because it's still so early in the season. As we get farther into the season, we're going to see more of that reflected. So right now, I would say that overriding what you see in the ROO for the research sheets or vice versa, I think both are fine. I personally like to look at shorter samples, so I like using the research sheets and leaning that way. But just wanted to speak to that really quick.
That makes sense. And I'm glad to hear that's the case because I want to play a little bit of Dallas too, and I don't want to feel bad about it. Cool. Well, it should be fun. I think, I will say one more thing just about hockey in general, and this is not specific to hockey. It's more a point about fishing where there's fish and planting flowers where the grass is green. Is that, James, you made this point similarly at the beginning of this, which is that the major sports, whether it's NBA or NFL, to some degree MLB, although MLB is such a grind that over the course of the year, maybe not quite as played as NFL and NBA. Hockey is a bit more niche, and because of that, like anybody who's putting the time into this, that we are going through this to this degree, looking at research sheets, looking at game pace, thinking through value, thinking through macro build structure, like we're probably doing 5 times more than even a lot of the sharps do. A lot of the sharps are just going to optimize and just call it a day. So it's a long way of saying that I think we're not the first people ever to say that you should play games that are easier to win. And I think hockey is ripe. I think we've got really good research sheets. I think we have insight both on a micro and macro level on how to play it. And because of all those reasons, I think we should all be excited to play more hockey and continue to have a good hockey year. So I would encourage people who have played other correlative sports and enjoy that to dive into hockey, because once you get past like the weird names and the positions and trying to figure out forward lines and power play lines, there's you have to trust me when I say that there's edge, and you can find that edge in hockey more than you can in sports, DFS sports that are a little bit more mature and have lost their edge over time. So that's just like a little plug for hockey in general.
I'm all amped up now. Let's go.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.
James, I don't know if you're going to post it or not, but for people who missed it, they may want to listen to even the last bit where we have a summary when they're building.
Yeah, I'll post the whole thing on YouTube. It's going to take fucking 6 years because this was an hour and 20. Yeah. I'll post it.
We talked for a while. Cool.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Mike. Appreciate all your insight.